Hey everybody, welcome back to my book chat channel. So I have another weekly book review for you. And this week I am doing the book It by Stephen King. So this is quite the book review. I'm going to sort of dive into the book itself a little bit and then the movies that go along with it. When I started reading it just a little while ago, as it was an incredibly long book, it took me a little over a week to get through it, and that was via audiobook. But I found myself very curious to know the differences in the book versus the movies. So, having seen the original short miniseries that came out on TV years ago, um, I wasn't entirely sure what I was getting myself into. So I ended up reading the book and then writing a bunch of notes, and then I went back and rewatched both the original movie and then the most recent one that came out not too long ago. And originally, when the newest movie came out and I watched it, before having read the book, I wasn't exactly happy with the movie, mostly because I was comparing it to what I remembered of the original, and I found my opinion very biased. And I can say now, having read the book, that I can definitely respect people's opinions as to why they liked this movie more than the other one. So before jumping into all of that, I'm going to run into, or rather jump into the synopsis for the book itself, and then we can get more into my thoughts and opinions on the whole situation. Okay, so It by Stephen King. Welcome to Derry, Maine. It's a small city, a place as hauntingly familiar as your own hometown. Only in Derry the haunting is real. They were 7 teenagers when they first stumbled upon the horror. Now they are grown up, men and women who have gone out into the big world to gain success and happiness. But none of them can withstand the force that has drawn them back to Derry, to face the nightmare without an end and the evil without a name. So, a rather short synopsis. I don't know what the real synopsis is on the back of the book, but that is purely what Goodreads has. So that's what I'm going to go by. So, diving into the book, I got lost in a lot of the detail. I found that the book was incredibly detailed, and it's something that I can greatly appreciate because I find that with books like this or stories like this, that, with movies, for example, there just isn't enough detail, and that when you go and dive into the book, you're hoping that there is a lot of detail to back that up and to explain more into the where, why, how, etc. So, I mean, I can say in comparison to the first movie, for example, that came out in the 1990s, it being played by Tim Curry, I can definitely say that the events in comparison to the book wasn't far off the mark. Now, the only issue I have with the original movie is the fact that they did things out of sequence as far as I'm concerned in comparison to the book. So in the book, each kid ends up coming across it many different times, many different circumstances. And that led to many different descriptions as to what happened each time. And in the original movie, I mean, I acknowledge the fact that it's a very long book, and as it was a pretty long movie, both the old one and the new one. But I found that they took one example or one experience from the book and placed it in a movie and ran with it. And so you ended up with circumstances in the movie that were out of place just because of where I know where they should have been. For example, I'm not trying to give too many spoilers away, but if you've seen the movies, obviously I'm not spoiling anything. So, for example, based on the original movie, in the very beginning, Beverly, she returns home. She ends up with that postcard from Ben with the poem on it. And then her dad ends up confronting her about whatever it is she's holding, reads it, tears it up, and then it gets kind of violent between father and daughter there really quickly, where she bolts out of the house and takes off. Well, I was almost annoyed with that situation right off the get-go, because that particular situation doesn't happen until quite a ways into the book. There are many different circumstances and situations that happen long before that particular one comes around. On top of the fact that for actually both movies, they didn't do that scene to its full potential. I mean, I realize there was a lot of detail that went into that series or that scene, but I mean, her dad takes after her. He chases her based on the book itself. He chases her halfway across town, determined to get her. And as you'll end up learning, he's completely influenced by it. Something you'll end up learning between both the book and the movies is that the parents and the adults of the town have, well, not all of them, but the majority of them have a little bit of an it influence from them. So they know when to turn a blind eye to things and can bring out the worst of people at the same time. So her dad, for example, has a history of abuse and violence and anger, and it brought out the worst in him by amplifying that a great deal. So when Bev returns home later, there is no memory of the situation from anyone except for Bev. So she's the only one that remembered the fact that her dad went to beat the crap out of her and then chased her across town. So I guess I was just a little disappointed. I acknowledge they don't have to go into all of that detail into a movie, but they could at least put things in proper order, and as far as I'm concerned, they didn't. And I found that the original movie was a lot like that. The events were obviously accurate, but they weren't in the proper order, in the proper sequence. And I found that there just wasn't enough detail being explained or told in the original movie. And I found that while there are some little things, some of those little things that they did change just didn't sit well with me, and it kind of bugged me a little bit. So, um, but even with all that being said, in the end, I still prefer some aspects to the original movie to the newest movie, mostly the gore part. Absolutely, the book is gory. I won't downplay that at all. The descriptions of the kids being murdered and things that go on, and there's a lot of gore and a lot of description. You wouldn't need a very good imagination to picture out what's going on. It gets described very, very well. And the original movie did not dictate that. I mean, I understand why, as movies back then weren't allowed to show certain things on TV, and I get that. Um, but the fact that, my biggest pet peeve or example would be in the very beginning with Georgie's death. Um, in the original movie, they basically just show that his arm goes in the drain, it gets grabbed, and it does his, baring of teeth thing, and then it cuts out the scene. They don't expose you to the gore and the unnecessary visual image of a child being murdered, which, in my opinion, doesn't need to be done. I think that the people's imagination does a fine job of filling in the blanks all by itself, and with the lead up to it, it was just fine. Now, the newest movie, um, the newest movie, I can absolutely appreciate why people like it more than they like the original, if only because, as far as I'm concerned, with maybe some small differences, that movie was almost 100% accurate to the book, from the gore to the situations, the events in its proper sequence. Again, they did change a few things, which did kind of irk me a little bit, but on an overall standpoint, um, it was pretty accurate to the book, and I can respect what they did, but in the end, I still wasn't really happy with the movie. And some of it's because of the fact that, I went through the book, and there was a lot about the book that I enjoyed. And I wish that they would have found a way to include it or done things a bit differently to explain some of the things in the book in this newest movie, and they didn't do that. In the newest movie, there was a lot of head nods and slight mentions to things in the book. For example, the turtle, which is sort of my biggest pet peeve. There was a mention of the turtle, sort of a subtle hint to the idea of the turtle, but there is no explanation to the turtle. And if you have no idea what I'm talking about, go read the book. Trust me, it's worth reading just to get that explanation. Um, I really wish that they would have dove more into that. It would have been way more interesting and fascinating to have them dive into that whole concept. The fact that it is not what he appears. Yeah, okay, both movies dictate that he's basically like a giant spider or just this big creature. And our mind kind of picks something that we know, and that's what we see. But I think what bugs me is the fact that there is way more to what it was or is than either movie um, showed. Like, there is two parts to it. There's a whole, um, it's hard to explain. Like, there's a whole part to what it is that got completely left out. He's more than just a supernatural creature that's come along and he's eating kids. You know, the entire town, I mean, literally the entire town of Derry is built and focused around the energies and the existence of this creature. And okay, maybe a little spoiler again if you haven't read the book, you know, to find out that based on the book itself, it was actually female. And by explaining that bit of information, they actually could have gone into a more detailed explanation as to why Stan committed suicide. Like, there was more to that as well. They just didn't go into enough detail about certain things for my liking. You know, the fact that, again, it was female and it had, um, there was a whole story that went with that. And when they actually destroyed it, the entire town of Derry collapsed in on itself, because the energy was displaced and destroyed and it had to go somewhere. So, with it no longer supporting the town, literally, it fell upon itself. So, I can definitely say that, I mean, if you take the original movie and the newest movie and you kind of take all the events and merge things together, you would have a pretty good picture of what happened in the book in terms of its main story, its main events. But still, I wish that they would have included a lot more of some of the back history story, like some of the different events that they mentioned. You know, the fire at that pub and the explosion that happened at the Easter egg hunt with the kids. You know, some of these events that didn't get really shine too much light on because they weren't really. I mean, they were necessary and kind of part of the story, but they weren't at the same time, so they kind of got left out. So, I don't know. I think all in all, I would prefer the audiobook to all of the different variations of a story, if only because the audiobook is sort of like listening to a movie that hasn't been changed or tainted or manipulated in any sense. Um, it's basically like listening to a movie, in my opinion, which is why I like audiobooks. Um, the only thing I do like about the movies versus the books is the fact that some of the detail that was in the book got left out, and I'm kind of grateful for that. Again, with the endless descriptions of all the different kids that was murdered, didn't need to know that. Or the amount of sexual content that was in the book, I'm really grateful that got left out. Um, you know, which brings me to another, I guess, thought about the newest movie. There are definitely some scenes in there that I thought were point blank pretty stupid. Um, you know, the fact that you had when Bev goes and searches of her dad and comes across the old lady, okay, fine. But as she morphs into this stupid creature with no clothes on and chasing her around the house, I'm sorry, that is more dumb than scary. There was absolutely no point and purpose to that. As far as I'm concerned, the original movie did that better. Like some of the scenes like that, they were just dumb. And I felt like it's stupid humor, and I felt it had absolutely no place in this newest movie or in the story at all. Because based on the book, there is no stupid humor in it. There is absolutely a lot of good humor in it, and there's definitely some parts in it that make me laugh. But overall, it wasn't necessary. So, that is sort of my long and drawn out thoughts and opinions, and I could keep going on this book. Like, there is so much detail between the book and the movies that I could dissect this down to its itty bitty gritty neat details. But then we'd be here for another 20 minutes at least. So, anyway, so that is sort of my thoughts and opinions and my take on it. I'd say based on the original movie, what did I say? Okay, so based on the original movie, I'd give it a 3-star rating just because the fact that I preferred the actor for the clown, I preferred the less gore, I definitely preferred some of the more subtleties in that movie versus the newest one, which was just a little over the top in some cases. The newest movie, I would give a 4-star rating, if only because of the accuracy to the book. There was way more accuracy to the book in terms of that. And then the book itself, I would give a 5-star. I felt it was well written. There was lots of historical background. There was lots of detail. As far as I'm concerned, there's no question left unturned. Everything gets wrapped up and is well ended when it comes to how things go. So, yeah. Alright, so with all that said and done, again, that is my thoughts and opinions on the book It by Stephen King and its movie interpretations that have come out over the last however many years. So, have you read this book? What were your thoughts on it? Have you seen the movies? What were your thoughts on it? I hope to see your thoughts and opinions down on in the comments, and I hope to see you all back here next week for another video. I thank you all so much for tuning in, and I hope you all have a fabulous weekend. Happy reading.